that's 13, right? Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us today for the Brevard County Charter Review Commission, our last meeting before we turn it over to the voters. Why don't we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And we'll ask Mr. Jenkins to lead us in that pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Melissa, if you would please call the roll, that'd be great.
Robin Fisher.
Here.
Kendall Moore.
Here.
Marcia Newell.
Here.
Mike Herodopoulos.
Here.
Marie Rogerson. Blaise Tredis.
Here.
Bob White.
Here.
Matt Nye.
Here.
Gabriel Jacobs Kirstein. Tom Jenkins.
Here.
Cole Oliver.
Here.
Sue Schmidt.
Here.
Jordan Chandler.
Here.
Vic Lubker.
Here.
And Dave Newman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum present. Fantastic. All right, if you look under tab D, we have the minutes from last time. Does anyone have any concerns about those minutes before we move forward? All right, without any objection, Mr. White moves it forward. I'll second that, and we approve the minutes. All right, we have reports. And before I recognize our staff, I want to recognize our staff for the just remarkable job that Melissa and Jim have done over the almost last year or so. I really applaud handling a lot of difficult issues and the bureaucracy and paperwork and chaos associated with it. Dealing with lawyers and elected officials is not an easy task, and you all have done a remarkable job, and I just wanted to express our thanks for just a job well done. So bravo, thank you. And I'm going to ask our lawyer if we're allowed to collect a fund and give them a nicer gift. So we'll see if that's allowed. Am I allowed to do that? That'd be great. But thank you very much for your great work on that. So why don't we go over to our staff first for their reports before we go over to our county attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. Before I get started, I just want to remind you, this is the first time we've been back in this room in a number of months. Same type of microphones. The green light means you're on, green light you're off. The best way is to keep the microphones off until you speak, so that way the TV doesn't get a little bit of feedback and everything. In your package, there was the memo on, you asked for how different counties handle the county or commissioner vacancies. So staff, we put it together. I just want to emphasize this is what we knew at the time based on their charters and their websites that we could find everything. So in case something's changed in the last few months, we may or may not have it, but that information's there. And then at your seat, we received this morning from the supervisor of elections, you asked for the timeline to fill a seat, and this is for a county commissioner's seat. And I'm just going to summarize it a little bit. The supervisor, you would have at least 1 week of candidate qualifying. Then the supervisor's office needs 7-10 days to set and proof the ballots, and they have to mail those out to the military 45 days prior to election day. And then so based on those two deadlines, the timeline would be approximately 8 to 9 weeks for each election for primary and general. So you're looking at about 4 months to from the moment a vacancy fills. And in the charter, there's language in there that the board will sit down with the supervisor of elections, set the timeline. So it'll probably be a little bit longer than the 4 months from the moment you have a vacancy to you have an election to fill the seat. And then of course there's at the end of it, there's the week to qualify, make sure the election has been certified.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions on that? Melissa, did you have any additional information for us, or? Okay. All right, next we'll turn to Mr. Gugelman for his materials. That's found in number E, or letter E, on proposal number 8, Memo and Vacancies. Mr. Gugelman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, in response to a question by Commission Member Lubker, is my memo of July 24th, and it deals with the issue Proposal 8 and the filling of vacancies. And it appears that there is, in my estimation, a problem with the language that's in the current charter. And that language, to my knowledge, has been in the charter for a long time. may actually go back to the original charter. But it's not, the method of filling a vacancy is not consistent with the Constitution and with state law. And what I did was I looked not only at the statutes and the Constitution, but I also sampled a number of charters from some of the larger counties that are not special charter cases like Duval or Dade. And I found that their charters are all consistent with the Constitution and the statute. And basically, what that means is if it's 28 months or less, the governor fills it. If it's more than that, remaining in the term, a special election is called. And that's the way it's basically set up. And the root of that is actually in the state constitution. I had submitted a proposal based on that to amend the charter, and I tried to include in there some alternative language if the law was ever changed, the Constitution was ever changed, that kind of parallels what this board had talked about last time as to how they'd like to see that filled. I don't see that, unfortunately, in the package, so I'm not sure where that's at. But
Jim, do you have do we have that language somewhere? Is it not in the packet?
He's talking about language that he sent. We'll have to check the email and see if we can find it and get it to you guys.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Well, see, then people are smarter than me.
Yeah. All right, let's, well, why don't, before we start reading it over, make sure you find the right one. If not, we'll get a copy of it, because I want to make sure, as I think Blaze brought it up last time, let's make sure we have something on paper that we're looking at, because there's no tomorrow in this. All right, so let's get it right today. In broad strokes, Mr. Gugelman, can you kind of walk us through just the top lines of the way you drew it up, and then we'll look at the language. If necessary, we'll, of course, bring it up later.
actually, I do see a, hang on just a second. No. Yeah, basically, the way I tried to put it together was I followed language that's in a lot of other charters, and that's basically states that if there's a vacancy, it'll be filled according to state law and the Constitution. And then I included some additional language in there, and this is something that had been done with the Orange County Charter, and that is they put a proviso in Orange County as to how the vacancy would be filled if the law was ever changed to allow local option to do it. And the local option that I put in was basically what we had talked about at our last Charter Review Commission meeting, where you wanted to have the county commission have a chance to fill the vacancy, give them about 90 days to try it, and if they didn't, then it would revert to the governor. And that's if there is, I think, a year or less in the time of the term. But that would only be an alternative that would come into effect if the state law were ever changed.
Okay. Mr. Tredice, you had a question or a comment?
Oh, I was just going to comment that I actually could not find your resolution in the email that I got. So I just wanted to point that out. So I looked for it and couldn't find it.
I tell you what, I just found it in here, but it's under tab H. And it's not the first there's the Tredice version under tab H, and then if you go to the next one, CRC resolution number 2022-005 is basically what I drafted. And the crux of it is on page 2 of that resolution.
Ms. Schmidt for a question?
Yes, Paul, In the spreadsheets that we were sent, there's 21 counties listed, and of those, 14 have one simple statement, that it will go according to Florida law.
Right.
And like Miami-Dade, Orange County, some of the larger counties, Volusia County has a council, Miami-Dade does the same thing. I mean, so they're not exactly like Brevard County by any stretch.
No.
And so I was wondering, the simple statement that is listed in these sheets for what the counties have, where they say a vacancy in the office of county commissioner shall be defined and filled as provided by general law. Is that not a good enough legal statement?
It is.
Okay, so
It
that
is.
really is all we need.
Technically, it really is all that you need. And what I did with the draft resolution that I put together was to take the language, and I'm looking at page 2 of that, is to take the language that's in our charter now and kind of modify it to basically reflect state constitution and state statute, and which basically follows the law. But you're correct. A simple way to do it would simply be,
I guess to me, being a layperson, not one of the attorneys, and I won't say anything about attorneys, it seems to me the best solution is to have a simple solution that the average person that reads it can understand.
you're following the KISS rule.
Mr. Gugelman, for people not only here but watching on television, could you please walk us through what the state law is
Yeah.
currently? And
Yeah.
then this will give us a little
Yeah,
perspective,
this-
because we're not going to bring this up till later. Yeah,
I'll be happy to do that.
thank you.
Basically, the root of this is the state constitution, and then there are a couple of statutes that have been passed to basically implement that. And what the state constitution provides is that there's 28 months or more remaining in a term, then the vacancy is filled by special election. If there's less than that, then the vacancy is filled by the governor. And there have been a couple of statutes that are set forth in the memo that I sent you, and they basically implement that formula that's in the state statute.
And then walk us through, what's the current language in Brevard County for those?
Yeah, the current language in the Brevard County Charter is that if there's a vacancy that occurs and there's 1 year or less remaining in the term, the governor fills the term. If it's more than that, you have a special election. And basically, the crux of it is it's inconsistent with the state constitution, which, rather than 1 year, uses 28 months as the cutoff point.
Okay, great. Mr. Lubiker, you had a question?
First of all, Mr. Gugelman, thanks for doing the research on this. In your opinion, then, based on state law, would this even pass the 3-attorney review process?
Would which,
If this proposal for Mr. Burns, he's put a lot of work into this. I hate that we're at .6 on this, and now we realize that we've kind of got a legal challenge with state
yeah, no,
constitution. But
whatever.
it is what it is.
Yeah, whatever, I recommend to you that whatever you do today, basically you want to have something, as Ms. Schmidt pointed out, which is basically to follow state law. And as we've tried to discuss in the past with the various alternatives, they're basically all inconsistent with state legal requirements.
So I think that puts us in a kind of a procedural problem here now, too, because potentially, if we amended this, I don't know what Mr. Burns has written up as far as his ballot language goes, but that's going to be impacted too, right?
Well, I would just see it as another amendment filed during the meeting. We've
Okay.
already had our 3 meetings, and just like I think we've all agreed to, the procedures going from day one, is we're going to treat this almost like a legislative process. Whatever the thing starts as doesn't necessarily mean what it finishes as. So we have the ability today to write it up. It could be as straightforward as Ms. Schmidt brought up, which is we're going to have to put some ballot language on and say that we're going to change it from 1 year to 28 months. That would be one option. We can do nothing and do nothing. That's not a bad idea. Would get you current, and a lot of fun debate on that, but such is the process. But why don't what we do? I know Mr. Burns is here. He is here, isn't he?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, you're right in front of my thing. So we could. Why don't we table because we're going to go to active proposals. We're going to go to number 8 first. Stew on that as we listen to proposal 17 on term limits. So we'll kind of, this is obviously a new monkey wrench thrown at us here. It's the will of what people want to do on the board. And remember, we only have 13 people here. So 10 out of 13 have to vote yay on this to even put something on the ballot. If we choose to do nothing and it just goes by the wayside, the current situation would stand, which is 1 year or less the governor, 1 year or more the special election. All right, is everyone clear on that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll go to proposal number 8 next. We'll temporarily pass number 8. At this point, we'll go to the second proposal on our agenda today, which is term limits pledge, proposal number 17. And Mr. Tomblides, I believe you're here. If you could please come forward and kind of remind people where you're at, and there's a couple of options that we have on these term limits measures. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we can all agree it's been a very quiet 48 hours on this issue. So last time we checked in, I wanted to get some input from you. Mr. Lubker had pointed out that we had an issue with partial terms, and so we took some steps to address that. My remedy was if a partial term is 2 years or longer, that would count as a full term for the purposes of term limits. If it were shorter than that, that would not count, and you would be able to go on and serve an additional 2 terms. We had some issues with how the language was structured. We did change it to a limit on consecutive elections, as you had pointed out, that rather than a limit on terms, so it would be more difficult for people to game the system. I thought we had a good proposal in place. Mr. Tredis had offered his own proposal as well, which was a little bit different in the verbiage, but the main difference between my version and Mr. Tredis' version is that handling of the partial terms. Under Mr. Tredis' version, no partial terms whatsoever would count as a full term for the purposes of term limits. So if a county commissioner were to resign with 3 years remaining on the term, that individual would be able to serve those 3 years and then 2 additional terms before terming out. As I stated in the memo that I sent around, I don't think that is a huge stumbling block. I don't think that is a substantial enough issue to let this proposal go by the wayside. And I don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So frankly, I'm okay with either option that's been proposed. And I would suggest that this panel maybe take an informal poll to see how people want to handle the partial terms issue, and then take a full vote after that.
Are there questions? Okay, we have some appearance cards before we go into our own discussion on this. We have Ms. Sandra Sullivan.
May I just have
I'm sorry, of course.
Sorry, yeah, one last thing. There have been some comments that have been made just in the last couple days from the county commission about this issue. And I just wanted to remind everyone that the job of the charter review is not to be a rubber stamp for the county commissioners. You guys are supposed to be, independent, objective decision makers in your own right. I mean, that's why we've had these meetings, so we can get independent ideas and thoughts, and not just regurgitating what the county commissioners would like to see. Because if the job of this panel was just to regurgitate back to the county commissioners what they wanted, then we wouldn't need these meetings. We wouldn't need to spend the money. We wouldn't need to bring you all in here. The county commissioners could just stand in front of a mirror and ask for advice. So I think let's not forget the spirit of this panel and the integrity of the charter review. So thank you, everyone.
Well said, thank you. Sandra Sullivan, and everyone who's publicly speaking today, you'll be allocated 3 minutes. If you use it, great. If you don't, even better. And we have we'll have questions as well that you can extend your time on. So, Ms. Sullivan, welcome back.
Well, thank you. Sandra Sullivan from South Patrick Shores. So in watching the county commissioner meeting, is very concerning that they would like to do away with the two-term and make it a three-term. And we know over the past months that this Charter Review Board has been operating, that in February, former Commissioner Fisher presented first doing away with the term limits in the charter, and then later revised it to extending it to 3 terms. So I'm very happy to see that this proposal was put forth to restrict it to 2 terms without coming back and serving additional time after a gap. I think that there's a lot of support from the public on term limits. Over 77% of people supported term limits. It was very concerning to me at that commission meeting that it was suggested by one of the commissioners to the other commissioners to lean on their appointees to this board to not approve this term limit proposal. And so that's very concerning. I thought that was very inappropriate. And then finally, I had a legal question for who's here from legal.
I am.
Okay, thank you. Is that as there are former commissioners sitting on this board who potentially, as it's written now, could come back and run again, whether they should recuse themselves from voting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right. Katie Delaney. Ms. Delaney, you're recognized.
So I too was a little surprised about the county commission meeting, and I hope that you all approve this proposal because, like I've said many times before today, if the President of the United States has 8 years, that should be plenty for our county commissioners. If the county commissioners say that that there's a learning curve to this job, that they feel that they can't get it done within the 8 years, and maybe there can be a training that's brought forth to new commissioners or candidates. That could be some kind of compromise. But I think that the people have spoken pretty clearly that we want term limits. We don't want people being career politicians. So I hope that you approve this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Delaney. Any questions? All right, next. We have Kristen Snyder.
I'm actually here to speak about the next one.
Oh, I'm sorry, they gave me the card for this one. Okay, no problem. Mr. Burns, Robert Burns, you're recognized on this issue.
Excellent. It's a Simpsons joke. Am I? Nick kind of alluded to what I was going to say in reference to Commissioner Kurt Smith's comments when he brought up that item. He said specifically that he wanted the commissioners to reach out to their appointees to give them direction. And when I heard him say that, I was confused because, like Nick said, I thought that the Charter Review Commission acted independently of the county commission. So I wanted to get some clarification on that statement as well.
Well, has anybody been I've not been contacted. Anybody else get contacted? No. All right.
Yeah,
I guess no one listened to him.
Okay.
All right. So, thank you. All right, so we have heard all the public comments. There's no other cards, correct, Melissa? Okay. We have 2 options in front of us, and I'll try to clarify those, and if the sponsors want to clarify, they can as well. The one is by Mr. Tredis, which would give them the option of, if they win a special election, they still get 2 additional terms, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the other option that's been put forth by the sponsor is one which the President of the United States currently follows. That is that if they come into that term with 2 or more years left, they can only serve that remaining term. If they're fortunate enough to get reelected, then they would be done. So we have those two options before us today. Really, it's a majority vote on the first part, meaning we're going to pick one of those, just laying it out, and we'll get into the questions. You can either pick Mr. Tredis's option or Mr. Tombolidis' option. And then once those are done by majority, we have a final vote, and that final vote will require 10 votes in order to get on the ballot. Okay? So, Mr. Tredis, why don't you go first to kind of present yours in a better light if I haven't done a good enough job, and then we can ask questions of you, and then from there, we'll have Nick come up and kind of get his, but I know he's kind of open either way. I have a stronger opinion one side than the other, but we'll see where this debate takes us. So, you're recognized, Mr. Tredis.
Thank you. I'd like to, first of all, before I forget saying it, I don't really know that the 22nd Amendment, the presidential example, has really relevance here. That's the President of the United States. I guess that's the Vice President taking over office. I just don't think that's really a really important comparison or benchmark, whatever the 22nd Amendment is. I think that what the really important thing to understand between the difference between mine and Mr. Tombolidis' proposal is that under my proposal, a person who runs for office twice will be able to at least serve beyond, say, 6.5 years. Under Mr. Tombolidis' proposal, if someone were to win a special election with 2.5 years in the term remaining, they could run only once more, and that's it. And that means they would serve on only 6.5 years after having been elected twice. And that seems patently unfair to me, especially if you ever had to go through an election, you'd think it's unfair. So my proposal would allow that person to run again beyond 6.5 years. And so does Mr. Tombolidis's. Because if there were less than 2 years, then they could run twice for a total of 3 elections for up to 10 years in office. So on the upside, the lengthier side, mine is up to 12 years, his is up to 10. That's an insignificant difference to me, really. But what is significant is someone who is elected twice and can only serve 6.5 years. It just seems completely unfair to me. So I think I have a better proposal. And also, I didn't even realize it until Mr. Gugelman's memorandum came out that it's a technical but important, I think, problem with Mr. Tombolidis' wording, which is he says a special election of less than 2 years. Well, there shouldn't be a special election of less than 2 years because the governor appoints if it's 28 months or less. So that is a wording difficulty that's there. My proposal eliminates that. My proposal also takes care of the problem about, it was discussed previously, about gamesmanship by resignation. My proposal includes the language that that basically a resignation cannot defeat defeat the whole scheme. So I just think my proposal is better for those reasons. The sponsor, I think, well, he said he supports my proposal, so if you're at all in support of either proposal, I think you should vote for mine. Thank you.
Well said. Questions?
I agree with Mr. Tredis.
Okay. Mr. Tombolidis, did you want to come forward and kind of walk yours through? Because you're the sponsor of this. You work on it nationally. We want to be very respectful of that. If you think Mr. Tredis is the way to go, we're willing to go that direction, but it's your call.
Sure, and I agree with Mr. Tredis. I do think it's an insignificant difference. I would just point out in my proposal that we don't address appointment by the governor. That would not apply against term limits under my proposal under any circumstances, because mine is a limit on elections, and if you're appointed, you haven't been elected. So we do address what happens with a special election, but if you're appointed by a governor, whether it's the current one-year framework or whether it's, I think you guys were talking about 28 months possibly, if things change, that wouldn't, my proposal would have no impact on that whatsoever. It's perfectly consistent with that rule. I do think because there seems to be an emerging consensus behind Mr. Tredis' more flexible proposal, I would like to endorse that one
Okay,
over
that makes it
mine
easy.
and just go with that. let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
All right, so without any objection, we're going to take away the potential amendment put forth by Mr. Tomboulides, and we're going to exclusively first vote on getting this amendment in place. Once the amendment's in place, we will have the final vote on in order to get 10 votes to place it before the voters, and then we need to, later in the day, work on the ballot language, make sure that's consistent. So is that okay with you?
That's perfectly fine.
All right, so without objection, you'll see that amendment number B has been removed from consideration. We're now on amendment number A, with Mr. Tredis has already explained. Anybody have any questions on Mr. Tredis' amendment? Mr. Fisher?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I got up this morning thinking how my Republican friends usually say, and I consider a lot of y'all friends, that we want less government. And I started thinking about what was in place today, and what's in place today is no commissioner can run for 2 consecutive terms. And these other things are creating more issues. I originally suggested three terms. That got shot down. I respect that. But I think there's an option of doing nothing. And the reason I think we're really talking about this, somebody's worried, it doesn't affect me one way or the other, so I'm not running, but if I wanted to run, I can still run. I don't think any Mr. Goodman or Blaze would say that. I have no desire to run, though, so let's make that clear. But I look at, Mr. Jenkins can help me this, when did we become a charter county?
94.
So, 94, and I don't probably know a whole lot before 94, but I would say that there's no commissioner who's ever served more than 2 terms. I think I'm right on that. Well, Truman did, but he didn't do it after the charter was. He did it. So no commissioner has ever served 2 terms. To my knowledge, there's only 2 commissioners that ever tried to come back, and that was Commissioner Nelson and Commissioner Infantini. And both of them got defeated. So the system, if people wanted them back, they had the right to try to run, and they didn't run. So we're sitting here coming up with this whole new concept when it's never been a problem. The current rule says no 2 commissioners you can only run 2 terms. That's what's happened. You haven't had any commissioners serve more than 2 terms. So I don't understand why we're going through this whole deal. So I say there's a third option, and that's to do nothing and leave it like it is.
We had that same option on number 8 earlier today, too, so it's
Yeah.
something. Did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think just because it hasn't occurred yet, that doesn't mean that it's not going to occur in the future where someone tries to run for a 3rd term and is elected. Both of those candidates that you mentioned came very close, actually, to getting back onto the county commission. And what we're seeing with the historical trends among elected officials everywhere is that tenure has just exploded across the board. Local officials, city councils, state legislators, members of Congress. And so I think it would be reasonable to anticipate that someone might try to run for office for a 3rd time, and this would be very useful. As I've mentioned before, we live in one of the wealthiest and most well-educated and vibrant counties in America, and to me, it seems a little ridiculous to say that 5 people among 600,000 are so indispensable that we can't find a new voice, a new perspective to come in every 8 years and fill that role and offer creative new solutions to modern problems. So I do disagree with you, Mr. Fisher. I do respect you immensely, but I just fundamentally disagree with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And my comeback to you, sir, is that there's 600,000 people can decide whether someone should come back for a 3rd term if they decide to run. And the 2 candidates, Commissioner Infantini and Commissioner Nelson, I don't believe it was that close. I think they actually lost convincingly. So I don't think there's really a problem.
May I address that?
Yeah.
Sure.
I would just say, we don't live in a pure majoritarian democracy. The Founding Fathers rejected that out of hand. Our system of government has always respected not just people's rights to choose their elected officials, but also to choose the parameters around who can be elected. So, for example, if you wanted to vote for someone who lives in Nevada to be the governor of Florida, you couldn't, even if that person got 80% of the vote statewide in Florida. We have restrictions, we have qualifications on who can serve, and term limits happens to be a qualification that 82% of the people support. So, I would say in this republic of ours, we have to respect not just who people want to elect, but what parameters do people want governing public service.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, let me go down that road, and Nick, you might be able to help me to get me there as well. Kind of going down the road that Mr. Fisher talked about. I've probably thought about this one more than any other one that we've had, and around this table, we've had lots of good jokes and heated discussions, since we've been here. But one of the things that impacted me the most, Mr. Jenkins said it, and I'm not sure if he said it on the record or under his breath that day when we were having a heated debate on this issue, but he said some of the comments being made by the board were almost as if all the propriety lived here as opposed to within the elected body, as if we're right and elected individuals are wrong. And it's almost as if you're tightening it down more and more because elected officials are the worst among us. Right? And I just kind of feel like, well, you said they could do this or they could do this. It hasn't happened yet, but, I think there were Delray examples and other examples of people trying to skirt the system. And certainly it's happened plenty of times. But just looking around this table, Mike Karadopoulos was a hell of a Senate president, and if we could have him back, I'd take him again. You got a great public defender sitting right there. You've got good former county commissioners. You've got some of us that have served in other positions, some good folks on this table who have run and not been elected. And even for the future, people like yourself, Jordan, Dave Newman, Marie, when you run one day, if you've done 8 years and you've done a hell of a job, I'd love to have you back. All right? So we already have 8-year term limits today. Even if we are rejected out of hand, Mr. Fisher's proposal of going to 12, I'm not sure we need to continue to tighten it down and tighten it down and tighten it down and tighten it down farther than it is today. We have an existing 8-year term limit. Could somebody skirt that system? You're right, they could. I mean, I think arguably it could happen. What's that? I mean, they haven't, but I think Nick is right. They could.
Will you
right?
promise to support it when they do?
I'm actually a believer on the other side of things. I think we have term limits, and it's called elections. The other struggle for me was I served on a city council. Sue's kind of well aware of this, and when I was a first-year councilman, there was 75 years of service sitting around me. 3 people that I think have been 3 of the best to ever do that: Dick Blake, Joe Lee Smith, and Mayor Larry Schultz. And there were many days that I had great ideas that they told me, we tried that in 1983, and here's what the hell went wrong, right? And so I'm not necessarily, objectively opposed to the opportunity for people to go longer than that. I think your term limit scenario certainly has merit. People today are gaming the system in ways they never have before, right? And I agree with you on that, but I just struggle that where we are today, we have existing term limits. And are we good enough where we are with the 8, or do we need to tighten it down even further as you have proposed?
Right. Well, I will tell you, I do think what you say has a lot of merit in that there are some long-term public officials who have done an incredible job and certainly, have earned another term. But I think when we're looking at this systematically, there is on occasion a corrosive impact of being in office too long. I mean, look no further than the United States Congress for evidence of that, where, we've got people who've been in power for 30, 40, 50 years. They're trying to regulate social media and Bitcoin, and they might not know how to turn on a computer. So there's a definite trend toward careerism in politics. I think we have to look at it sort of like a business analysis, a cost-benefit analysis, where every proposal that we make is going to have some costs. And the costs are going to be, in this case, losing some of those long-term statesmen and stateswomen who've done a really good job. But the benefit is of new ideas, new faces, competitive elections. That's a huge thing. You mentioned you think term limits are elections. I think in theory they are, but in practice they're not, because the power of incumbency is so strong. If you look at the advantages that incumbents have, just by putting their name on the ballot, automatically they're going to get $10 in contributions for every dollar that goes to that challenger. Every initiative that they announce is going to be in the local paper. Incumbents can use taxpayer resources effectively to campaign for reelection. And so it makes a tremendous amount of sense in theory, but I think in practice, the deck is stacked. And when you go out and you say, well, why don't you just run and why don't you just beat an incumbent? It's like going to a casino and saying, well, why don't you just beat the dealer? I mean, it's not that hard. Why don't you just win the game? The game is rigged, unfortunately, because of those advantages of incumbency. And that's what we're trying to address, because I don't believe that those advantages dissipate for an incumbent who has been termed out and tries to run again.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Nick, thank you. It's been an
Thank you, sir.
extremely compelling argument, for sure.
One more question.
Sure.
Nick, I hate to compare Brevard County to Washington DC, but can you tell me where new faces hasn't been able to arise in this county, where you have a problem with not having new elected officials or the same faces all the time? I'm trying to get an example of that, because I don't know of one.
Well, I would say that in this county, we do a pretty good job of turning seats over, in large part because we have so many term limits here. You know, we've got term limits on county commission, we've got term limits on several different city offices. Like I said, it hasn't prevented termed out county commissioners from running again in very recent vintage, and we can expect for that to happen again. I would say in this county, the only problematic areas, there are some city councils where members have served for a very, very long time because there are no term limits in place.
Yeah, and I think that's my concern, Mr. Chairman. There is not a problem in this county. There's a rule in place that no commissioner can serve 2 consecutive terms. That is a term limit in itself. And if he tries to do that, the voters will make the decision every 4 years on that. So I think we're creating a problem. I think we create more government, and I think less government's better.
Okay. Other ideas, comments? All right, so where we're at right now, since there's no other debate on this, if you vote for this, first we need to have the vote on the amendment to make it the potential item to vote on, and then from there we'll have the required 10 votes to place it on the ballot. And there's no other comments? Okay. So with that, we'll call the roll. Why don't we just do yay or nay on Mr. Tredis's amendment to be adopted as the amendment we'll vote on? All those opposed, in favor, say yay. Yay. Any opposed?
Nay.
The yeas have it by majority. We're now on the final vote. This will take 10 votes in order to place it on the ballot. And again, as we've discussed at length now, it codifies the idea that you will get 2 terms, and if you're elected in a special election, you can serve that first one without penalty, and you'll get 2 terms after that, which is very similar, I think, actually, to the current law. So with that, why don't we have the, Melissa, why don't you call the roll on this, because you're going to require 10 votes in order to pass this. If you're for the proposal that for the term limits measure, say yay. If you're opposed, of course, say nay. Melissa, please call the roll.
Robin Fisher,
Nay.
Kendall Moore,
No.
Marcia Newell,
No.
Blaze Tredis,
Yes.
Bob White,
Yes.
Matt Nye,
Yes.
Tom Jenkins, Cole Oliver,
Yes.
Sue Schmidt,
No.
Jordan Chandler,
Yes.
Vic Lubker,
Yes.
Dave Newman,
Yes.
Mike Herodopoulos,
Yes. All right, by your vote, there was a failure to get 10 votes, so the status quo will hold at the current time, meaning there is a two-term limit, and if a person is elected in a special election, they would get that full 2 terms.
Well, I think we just leave what we have, don't we?
That's correct.
I mean,
Yeah, nothing changes.
So nothing changes.
Proposal number 17 is not adopted, and the current term limits stand. Nick, I want to thank you for your time. You did a remarkable job explaining the issue, and would have been interesting if everyone was here. I think it was 8 to 5, right? Okay. Okay. Next, we're going to move to proposal number 24, dealing with the Workforce Housing Trust Fund. And Mr. Chandler, you're recognized on that issue.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't want to hold you all long. I think this is the 5th hearing on this particular item. But once again, let me go through quickly the fundamental principles of this particular proposal. Number one, as stated before, this creates a continuing non-lapsing fund for the county commissioners to fund through the sale of county surplus real property or any other funding sources that may be deemed viable options. And might I add that it also does not create a new form of taxation. Addressing the fact that we should stick with the trust fund that was established via ordinance back in 2007, I understand the rationale, but disagree. My proposal does a few things that the current ordinances do not do. Number one, it establishes permanency. We know that ordinances can be repealed and replaced at any time. So 2 years from now, when there are 3 new county commissioners, they can very well say, well, this issue is not a priority of mine, so let's get rid of it. And then the funding that is currently within this trust fund can be swept and go back to the general fund. It actually identifies a funding source, which the current ordinance does not do. Also, it makes sure that the funds that are allocated to the fund are not reverted back to the general fund. And I spoke with Mr. Gugelman per the recommendation from the Charter Review Commissioners the last time, and we worked together to clear up some of the ambiguity that was raised by Mr. Tredis, I believe in Section E, which deals with the implementation aspect of it. And you know, as Mr. Newman, someone who really has an extensive background in the nonprofit sector, said last time, this really is forward thinking. I think Mr. Lupker said it last time as well. We don't need to talk ourselves out of this, right? This simply gives the county commissioners another, I think, arrow in their quiver, is to be the exact words that you used, to tackle this problem. And we should allow the voters to decide, right, whether or not this should be placed in our county's charter. Mr. Kirstein, who is not here, who I believe is not here, he sent us an email earlier. He stated you have to start somewhere, right? And so just like I said, we don't have a magic wand, but this framework is simply a piece to the puzzle to help us see the bigger picture and address the issue that we currently have on our hands. And I'm going to close with this. One of my favorite speeches is actually by Dr. King. It was actually a speech that he gave before a Memphis crowd on April 3rd, 1968. As we know, the next day he would actually be assassinated. But Dr. King stood before that Memphis crowd and actually gave some very prophetic words. And I think it's some words that even still reign true today. Dr. King said, "Let us rise up with a greater readiness, and let us stand with a greater determination. Let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge, to make Brevard County what it ought to be." Yeah, we've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. Hell, we may not get there in 2 years with this. We may not address the issue in 5 or even 10 years. But slowly and surely, we will get to the promised land. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of appearance cards. One is Kristen Snyder, and that's followed by Tara with Family Promise of Brevard. Welcome, Ms. Snyder.
Hello. I just wanted to say a few things. I attended last meeting and listened to Community of Hope and Housing for Homeless talk about their part in affordable housing and transitional housing they provide. And I'm the administrator of Genesis House, and we are a homeless shelter. This year we're celebrating 45 years in serving the homeless in Brevard County. And one of the things that I'm very proud of personally is our founder, Mary Allen, is still with us as the president of our board, and our board is willing to let us meet the challenges that are facing us. So 2 years ago, the increase in the number of seniors, homeless calls, we developed a program for senior women. And someone asked me the other day what we were working on, and I said, you know, I'm trying to see how I can develop a program because Genesis House isn't going to be able to be a shelter for much longer. We are becoming, just because of the situation, transitional housing. So I just wanted to share just a few things with you. So in 2021, Genesis House housed 307 individuals. 86 of those we put in hotels because of COVID funds. Those aren't available anymore. Prior to that, our average was 182 people a year for like the last 5 years. So we've way increased who we have served and the numbers that we have served. And also the length of stay last year was 123 days. And we try to stay at 45. And in 2018, I went back before COVID, our average stay was 31 days. Currently, we usually serve up to about 50 people, and currently we have 2 beds for seniors and 2 rooms for families. Of all of the people that we have, which is probably about 37, I think, today, I have absolutely no plan for where any of them are going to go. And I still get 9 to 10 phone calls a day from people needing a place to go, from women and children. So I just encourage that we do take this as a first step, because it's just trickling down to becoming more and more problems. We're seeing homeless that can't afford what is there, and really there isn't anything there, but shelter is backing up, and it really is going to increase the number of people on our streets.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Are there any questions for Ms. Snyder? Well, thanks for what you do. Thank you very much. All right, Tara from Family Promise of Brevard is here as well. Welcome.
Hi, Tara Pagliarini. I'm the Executive Director of Family Promise of Brevard. We help families who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of losing their housing. We receive about 250 to 300 calls each month. These are from families who are living in hotels, doubled up with other people, who are living in their vehicles or in campgrounds, and from families who are at risk of losing their housing because they are paying 50 to 80% of their income on housing costs. It doesn't matter how good we are as a nonprofit. Our programs are stellar. We help 90% of our families move into stable housing and stay there. But there isn't affordable housing for families to move into. And so 2 years ago, I went to the city of Cocoa, and I asked them if they would donate a firehouse to our organization, and they said no. But then I went back for 2 years straight, and I asked them if they would donate firehouse number 1, which had been sitting vacant for 5 years, asked them if we could turn it into a hub of services that would focus on increasing the residents of 32922, increase their economic mobility, so that they could at least have a fighting chance to stay up with the cost of housing. They said yes to 20 years, so we're in that for 20 years. I was able to leverage that donation from the city to secure $1.8 million in federal and private funding that I could not have done otherwise if the government had not stepped forward and offered that solution. They said no. They said no. They didn't see it, but I knew it could happen if we could work together across sectors to leverage our resources. Family Promise of Brevard, Genesis House, Community of Hope, Housing for Homeless, all of us, we can't do it. The nonprofit sector can't do it by ourselves. It is a multi-sector issue. It's affecting our business. It's affecting our residents, affecting our education. Everyone, all of us play a part here. This is our community. And so today I want to just throw that out there, because what we're asking is you to think creatively and innovatively like we have. That's what you're expecting of us. That's why we get investments in our work, because they know that we're going to have a great return. So that's what I'm asking today, is for that consideration of how this could be leveraged to bring in even more funding to address the housing issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? One question I have, you mentioned that you help 90% of the families. What's the typical situation and how you help them I mean, you can't get them a house, obviously, but
Yeah.
what's the typical situation, how you transition
Yeah,
help?
there's so many ways. So we have 3 programs. We have emergency shelter, we have housing stabilization, and we have prevention. But what we try to do is increase our families' tenancy education and financial resources while also addressing their basic needs. And then incentivizing landlords with private and federal funds that can encourage them to take on families in a higher rent situation, but we build their economic mobility over time. So we might help buy down a rent for a year. So we're just very creative in working with those who have housing, and those landlords that want to be part of a solution and can be part of the solution. A great example is Remy Properties. Remy Properties has housing that's outside of the affordable range. However, they donated a unit to our organization. We placed a family, they set it at fair market rate, and we're working with a family in that location. If it works well, they're going to expand it into each of their locations. And it's just a great example of thinking outside the box creatively. If everyone did a little bit, we could really make a big impact on this issue.
And just to follow up on that, so you're subsidizing to get it to that number they need. And
Yes.
I know with Habitat for Humanity, I'm sure a lot of us have worked with in the past, I mean, and is it a situation where, what's the obligation for the family that moves into there? So that it is truly transitional housing, so how does that work?
Into
What
Habitat
obligations they have?
housing. I can't speak to Habitat housing. We haven't
You
had.
talk about yours. I mean,
Oh,
like, when they
into-
moved in that facility,
Yes.
that's not a lifetime situation,
No.
it's transitional. So what obligation does that family have to go, if you want to use a
Yeah.
term, like get back on their feet so that they can get into traditional housing?
It actually could be long-term. Our goal is to help that family reach the economic mobility that they could afford housing within our community. That is the goal. And so a big focus of ours is through an initiative called Elevate Brevard to increase revenue, wages through education and training. We're looking at barriers. So, and Brer spoke at the last meeting, for example. We went to Brer and said, what is your highest need certification? And they have CPT. Well, the EDC has CPT and there's scholarships.
Okay.
So then we're connecting residents to that training, to the employer. Will you hire residents of 32922 who are they don't have that social capital? Let's increase that pipeline. And then ultimately, they're going to be a great asset to our community because they're part of our tax base and they're giving back to the community through what they've given.
And then once they reach that income threshold, it goes to the rate that their neighbors might be paying, is that?
Yeah, we just started doing that, so I don't know, Mark, if you have an answer to that. He's our director for programs, but we just started it. The family just moved in a couple months ago, so it's pretty new. So it is establishing what that long-term goal will be, and each landlord may have a different outcome that they'd like to see.
Okay, this has been very educational. Thank you.
Yeah,
Vic,
you're
do you have a question?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is the income threshold, if I may ask?
Yeah, Mark is our, gosh, this is Mark Sexton. He's our director of programs.
The income threshold is really based on family size. So what we're looking at is a combination of different grants that we work through. So for, and I'd have to check my paperwork, but I want to say that for like a family of 2 where they have a single child, that income threshold may be $25,000 a year in order to qualify for government services. Correct. Right. So it's falling at, based off the poverty guidelines that HUD sends out, so they get updated every year. And so that really puts certain families in a pinch where they might make more than what the federal poverty guidelines allow support.
But not enough to.
Right, not enough to still be able to afford housing. So those are the situations where we're going in and trying to buy down rents to an area where they can afford it. And then we're committing the case management on that front end to work with the family to help build that economic stability so that at the end of that year, we're able to take that service we offer to that family and move it to another family that's in a similar position.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much. That was very illuminating. Thanks. All right, we have Sandra Sullivan. You're recognized. Welcome back.
Thank you. Sandra Sullivan, South Patrick Shores. I'm actually against this item for a couple of reasons. I attended the affordable housing presentation on community land trusts with private-public partnerships that would create housing opportunities. Also, we have within the county lands, I did records requests for our lands that have been set aside for affordable housing. There is an inventory of properties within the county for affordable housing, which we are just not utilizing. We have an issue in in Brevard County where, like other areas, we have an increasing number of investor-owned homes. It's at near 20%, about 20%, 26% in Orlando, and close to 50% in some other areas. So that's contributing. Short-term rentals and changing policies in certain areas have taken a lot of long-term rentals off the market. That market has increased over, just in the past year, the income coming into the county is over 90%. So these factors need to be considered because there are other means. I am very concerned about one of our commissioners communicating an intent that if the EELS program does not get passed by voters in the referendum, to take those lands that had the public interest to acquire for conservation and to liquidate and sell them as surplus lands. And it raises a flag for me, especially when we've seen recent lobbyists, developer influence with getting $30 million here, whether there's a deeper agenda here. So I'm just going to put that on the table. I think there are better means of addressing affordable housing with some other avenues. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Okay, there are no more appearance cards on this item. Are there questions for Mr. Chandler, the sponsor of the item? Just one question. I just want to be clear. With this, we talked about arrows in the quiver and options and so forth. This does not require any surplus land that's sold to be exclusively used for affordable housing, no?
Correct.
It's just an option that the county commission has?
Correct.
Okay. And given the actions of the county commission, they seem to be paying attention to our meetings as well, have you approached them regardless of how the vote might not just go today, but November, about getting this in the books, short of the charter?
Yeah, I have had conversations with the commissioners, more especially the commissioner who appointed me, but I have talked to the other commissioners, and, I mean, it's obviously undetermined at this point. This is the goal here,
Sure.
is to get this passed and put on the charter to make sure it's permanent, so.
Okay.
If it doesn't pass here, then I'll obviously go a different route.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Lupiker, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple comments. One, from a procedural perspective, this would kind of compel the county commission to take action. It mandates, once the voters say, I want this taken on as a problem, so whether it's 60,000 or 600,000, they now have to take this on as a regular issue. So I just want to make that point clear to everybody. And then secondly, the reason why I asked the question about the income threshold, and I didn't bring this up at the last meeting, but I'm going to now. About 3 months ago, I took someone in my house. Someone came to me, a mutual friend of this individual. She moved here from Texas to be with her best friend. Long story short, that best friend wasn't such a good friend. So she ended up going to one of these extended stay places, human trafficking, drugs. She had a boyfriend. He beat the crap out of her. This person came to me and said, hey, I know someone that might be able to help you in this situation. Well, the intention of going into it wasn't to let her stay at my place for a period of time. It was just to get her the resources she needed, an advocate, police department, all of that. Well, she had a full-time job. So she's living in a hotel, technically homeless, but she has a job. And it's a telecommuting job, $36,000 a year, and she's by herself. So she wouldn't have met the income threshold, but she didn't have enough money to get a place here in Brevard County. And that's really what the problem is, what's going on. So she stayed with me for about 3.5 weeks, didn't charge her anything, said just put the money in the bank, and kind of came up with a plan, said go back to Texas where your family is. Mm-hmm. But that's just one example of really what this problem is about. So I just want to share that.
Sure, thanks for sharing. Mr. White.
What's interesting is that this is a problem that's been around in Brevard County for a very long time. In fact, back in 1990, Sue Schmidt appointed me to the Brevard County Affordable Housing Task Force, if you can believe that. So yeah, I mean, this has been around for a very long time, and there are so many factors that impact this. It's not, it's not just somebody's income, it's the value of the dollar, that continually is eroded, year after year after year, decade after decade after decade. The buying power of the dollar continues to go down at the same time that people's incomes are kind of stuck and stagnant in many cases. So I'm for the proposal. I think that it is, as it's been characterized, another arrow in the quiver. And I think it's something that, that as a community needs to be addressed. And so, so I'm going to support it.
Others? Okay. We are prepared to vote on this now. As we've talked about before, it requires 10 votes in order to be placed on the ballot. I do support it, Ms. Chandler, and I'm glad to see you paired it to a very succinct level and one that's manageable and gives flexibility to the county, so thank you. And hopefully gives some people hope and accentuate the programs that already exist here in Brevard. So with that, Melissa, if you'd please call the roll, we'd appreciate it.
Robin Fisher,
Yes.
Kendall Moore,
Yes.
Marcia Newell,
Yes.
Blaze Tredis, Bob White,
Yes.
Matt Nye,
No.
Tom Jenkins,
Yes.
Cole Oliver,
Yes.
Sue Schmidt,
Yes.
Jordan Chandler,
Yes.
Vic Lubker,
Yes.
Dave Newman,
Yes.
and Mike Herodopoulos.
Yes. And I have that as a 10-3 vote, is that correct? Okay, by your vote, the proposal passes and moves on to the voters. Congratulations, Mr. Chandler. Okay, we are now going to return to our issue that we had some clarity on, and that is proposal number 8 by Mr. Burns, and with some competing amendments from Mr. Tredis. So, Mr. Burns, if you're still here? Is he here? Okay, okay. And so as I think Mr. Fisher brought up last time, we could just stick with the status quo on this. In essence, going to Mr. Schmidt's point, we'll just go to state law if we want to on this, or we can adopt the proposal that's on the table to adjust accordingly. So, Mr. Burns, you're recognized, and we have a couple amendments to look at, or we could look at a third amendment, which would be kind of going to the statute that is used in other parts of the state.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. As Mr. Lubker pointed out, I put a lot of work into this. And the reason I brought this forward was because I saw that we had what I perceive to be an issue with filling vacancies, on our commission when they occur. And we've seen that the effects of having that vacancy in practice during this particular vacancy. In the memo that I sent out, I know it's kind of lengthy, I did bring up, address the issue that this doesn't happen very often. And without sounding too brazen or offensive, I use the example of two candidates that we have right now who, by the end of their first term, should they be elected, would exceed the expected life expectancy in years for a male in Florida. And that's not including the effects of added stress of elected office or the effects of COVID and whatnot. So practically and statistically, we could be looking at having 2 more vacancies in the very next commission. So I felt there was something that needed to be addressed. With the memo that Mr. Gugelman put out, kind of, it stabbed me in the heart because it makes me feel like the problem is even worse than I thought, because I thought that we just had an issue if it was a year, but now it's almost 2.5 years. So according to the memo and the statute that's referenced, anyone who has more than 2 years and 4 months remaining, it's going to be appointed by the governor. The key word that the operative word I wanted to look at in that statute is shall. because one of the things that we argued at the very beginning of this was that we can't make the governor do anything. So the way that our charter currently reads is that the governor shall appoint. So the county doesn't have that power to tell the governor what he shall and shall not do. And then it was argued that some felt that the governor made the right decision in leaving this office vacant for the time being because we're close to an endorsement was one of, or it could be interpreted as an endorsement was one of the arguments. We're close to an election was one of the arguments. However, just referencing the statute that Mr. Googleman references in his memo, that operative word is shall. So we can't tell the governor what to do, but certainly the Constitution does. So that statute says that the governor shall make the appointment. And as we know right now, there has not been an appointment. So does the governor have the discretion of whether to follow that part of the Constitution or not? I don't think that he does, and I may be wrong, but I don't think that he does, but it says shall, and he is not. And it doesn't appear that he's going to. I don't want to try to predict the future, but he made a bunch of appointments over the last week to several county commissions, and I think Lee County and a couple other counties, but we were left off of that list. So I don't think that there's going to be a shall appointment. But I also think that that goes against the whole spirit of the Home Rule Act from 1973, I believe. Because if we are going to fill a vacancy for an elected office, especially for a special member or a single member district, with over half of their term remaining with someone who is not elected, I don't see how that is democratic, and I don't see how that is a representation for the people who elected the person to that office to begin with. So the first part of that statute says, unless otherwise provided by the Constitution. And my argument is that the Home Rule Charter Act is that exception. So I believe that the Home Rule Charter gives us the authority to make those appointments. Otherwise, what would be the point of having that first language in the statute? It says also, one of my questions for Mr. Googleman would be, is there a difference between counter officers versus county commissioners? Because in Article 8 of the Constitution, it is separated. So I don't know if this statute applies directly to constitutional officers like Mr. Tredis, or is it separate and apart from county commissioners? Because I think those are two different things that might be identified here vaguely in the statute. I was just taking notes while we were sitting here. And it says, unless otherwise provided by the legislature, except for the legislature, he doesn't make appointments. And I know I'm probably grasping at straws here, but I would say that the county commission is the legislative branch of the county government, so I don't know if that would count as legislature, when it comes to that statute. So, those are just my thoughts. My goal was to try to make sure that the people have the representation, that they are supposed to have according to the charter, that it's filled as quickly as possible, and that it's filled as close to the people as possible. This statute in the Constitution negates all those things and extends it to even twice the amount of time, and then we don't know if it will even happen, even though the Constitution says that it has to happen. So those are just my thoughts. I don't know where we're going to go from here, or if all those things that are in the memo are correct, I'm completely fine with it being amended to, just like some of those other charters say, that it's just filled in accordance with state law. But I did not see what was referenced in the memo to Orange County, the exception that he pointed out, language where he said that if the Constitution were to change. I didn't see that in the charter, so I was looking for some clarification on that. When I read the charter, I just saw they had an appointment process, but I didn't see I'm not sure the proper legal term for it, if something was to change for the Constitution. So that's all I have.
Questions, Mr. Burns? Mr. Oliver? Okay, please go ahead.
I just had a question for the attorney here. I guess theoretically, could the county file a writ of mandamus seeking to, since the Constitution says shall, the governor shall appoint for the vacancy, can the county file a writ of mandamus directing that he has to? And then what happens if he just still decides not to?
You know, I don't know of any case where that's been done. I suppose it's a possibility, but what the success of it would be is anybody's guess.
Thank you.
I've got a follow-up question to that. Who would have standing to do that? Like if, do you know, Mr. Eagle?
Maybe the county commission.
Okay.
Okay, so, Mr. Tredice, do you want to walk through a little bit your proposal on the table, and then we can have this discussion about it and see where this takes us? Again, there's the option of always is do nothing and keep the status quo. We can move to a modified version, which could come under constitutional assault, right? Based on what the latest information has come in. We could also probably look at that modifying and saying at 28 months or less that we give the governor X amount of time if he or she has not made that appointment. It will allow the county commission. I mean, there's a lot of things we could do here, but Ms. Tredice, what's your pleasure?
Thank you. I made my strike all amendment because I'm of the firm opinion that you should not leave an unlawful provision in the charter. And this currently worded charter is unlawful because it directly contradicts the Constitution and the Florida statute. So I'm definitely not in favor of leaving that unlawful wording in the charter. And that's why I made my strike all amendment. I made two of them. The first one was before I got Mr. Gugelman's memo, so I won't even address that. The one I think should be passed, in my opinion, it's 7 pages in to tab F, and I'll simply read it. It's as my amendment would have the section 2.7 read.
Well, before you get there, let me make sure everyone gets to that page. Which email is this?
Well, I'm going on a tab F.
Okay, I'm going to tab F.
7 pages in.
Okay.
It starts with an email from August 1st.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Okay.
in the middle of that page, you'll see the bold type, section 2.7 vacancy.
Yeah, thank you. Everyone on that?
It's-
Okay, just want to
and
just get there.
Okay.
Everyone there? Okay.
And what it is, it's basically what Commissioner Sue Schmidt said, which is it follows the simplest language which is used in county after county in Florida, and it says a vacancy in the office of county commission shall be defined and filled as provided by general law. I followed it with this sentence, a vacancy created by recall shall be filled as provided in section 5.2 of this charter, because our charter provides for the possible recall of county commissioners, and that is a completely separate process that would take place under the charter. So that's why I left that in there, and that sentence is in the charter. I took out the word "and suspensions" from the title because I really didn't see how suspensions has any application whatsoever. The word suspensions isn't in the current charter. It just seems like it was a complete waste of words, and maybe it just wasn't needed, so I took that out. But what it does is it makes it the simplest version I think there is. It's used, like I said, in county after county after county, and that's why I made it. That's all.
All right, questions for Mr. Tredice?
I agree with Mr. Tredice. Well, we know this is a problem. It's been highlighted by our Charter Review Council, and I think we should address it. And I agree that with the straightforward language that Mr. Tredice has proposed.
Okay, others?
I have a question.
Luker, yeah.
First of all, Mr. Burns, I apologize. I should have asked this question earlier on because you put a lot of work into this, and I just want to make that noted for everybody. I really appreciate what you're trying to do here, but one of my rules going in, I have 3 of them, and one of them was, is it legal? And that just doesn't meet the bar, so I'm in agreement with Blaze on this.
Mr. Gugelman?
One question for Mr. Tredice. Would you have any objection to striking the word general, as in general law? So it would just read as provided by law?
I have no objection to that.
And the reason is to include not only general law, but the Constitution.
Right. Yes, I think I would amend my strike all amendment in that regard.
Okay.
Could I ask-
Ms. Schmidt?
Rather than saying general law, could we just say Florida law? state of Florida law?
Well, what you're saying is as provided by law, and there are any number of
know.
court cases out there that talk about what that means. And what you do is you look to general law and you look to the Constitution.
I know that. Okay, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of the average person picks something up. Are they going to understand it? That was my only question. And I didn't know if there.
I mean, does it make any, I think that's more in the ballot language question maybe, because it sounds like Mr. Googleman's saying by law, but on the ballot language, you might want to put as Florida law, which would cover constitutional and statutory language, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Burns, you want to add something?
Yes, it was in response to striking the suspensions from there. As you know, we had a major suspension today over in Hillsborough County, and I don't think that our charter addresses suspension of office anywhere else except in that section for the vacancies. So should a suspension occur, if we strike that, I don't think we have any language to talk about how to fill that vacancy for the suspension, unless vacancy is defined as also a suspension, but I don't think that it is.
Yeah, I thought the same thing today when I heard that the governor suspended State Attorney Andrew Warren in Tampa for saying he's not going to follow the law. And I wrote this before that, obviously, this morning. But I've just never heard of a suspension. And I also, I think the governor today said this suspension is going to be followed by removal from office. I don't know how long that process takes. Again, I just think it's such an outlier possibility that it's just not worth bringing up.
I think in practical exercise, what could happen is, say a sitting commissioner was to be charged with a felony, and pending the outcome, of the disposition of that case, he's suspended until he's found guilty, he or she is found guilty, and then eventually removed. So I don't think you can serve while you're pending, felony charges that would count as a suspension, so that office is now vacant for however many years, those felony charges can exist for.
I'd be glad to add suspension back in and say a vacancy or suspension in the office of county commission shall be defined and filled as provided by law. If Mr. Googleman, suspension, is that scenario does that scenario play out where someone's arrested for a felony and the governor could suspend and it could take a while? Because I can see that, that's a possibility.
It happens occasionally.
What happened with that sheriff down in Broward County that was removed by the governor? And then I think he had to be officially removed or something by the Senate? Didn't something?
Yeah.
Yeah. But he did not appoint, did he appoint a new sheriff in the interim?
I think he did, yes.
Right.
Had to put an interim sheriff.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so for practical terms, where we're at right now is we would go to the current Florida law, which is 28 months or less, the governor would appoint for the remainder of that term, unless you want to add on anything to that if the governor does not make an appointment by a certain period of time. But I think you're going to run into some legal hurdles there. And I personally I think that the governor, going back to our term limits discussion, I think the governor did not appoint in this scenario because of the limited time. And I think he recognized that whoever he appointed would have the upper hand in an election, much like the debate we've had for weeks now on the term limits issue and why the incumbency is such a powerful device. So my guess is that in normal times, you would see the governor appoint pretty quickly. In this case, because of the limited time with this that remained, he was willing to go with 4 county commissioners. That seems to be the logic. I've not asked him that personally, but I think that's probably the logic he took. So let's have the discussion as far as, first let's have a vote on, let's see which one's first. Mr. Tredis, you get the first bite at this. So if yours is adopted, it would take the place, I'm sorry, which amendment was filed last, Melissa?
The one I'm talking about.
Okay, so Mr. Tredis, yours is in play. If we adopt your amendment, it would, in essence, defeat Mr. Burns' amendment moving forward.
Okay, can I make a comment about that?
Of course.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, I think it should be changed whether it's my amendment or something else, for the reason I already stated. But I just want to make sure that mine would read this, Section 2.7, vacancy and suspension. A vacancy or suspension in the office of county commission shall be defined and filled as provided by law. A vacancy created by recall shall be filled as provided in Section 5.2 of this charter, end quote.
Questions for the sponsor? Mr. Gogelman, you feel like this meets all our issues?
I do.
Okay.
I think it's right on. And it's, as Ms. Schmidt would point out, it's simple.
And Mr. Burns, this would effectively eliminate yours, so you're welcome to speak on whether you like this, considering the factors now that are in play, or you can make the arguments that maybe your amendment is still stronger. It's up to you.
Well, I definitely don't like the word defeat. I like the word alternative. For the record. But I
We'll call Wikipedia, see what they say.
But I completely agree, with what's said here today. I do just have some concern, though, and I don't know if we need to address it with that shall part of the Constitution. And I think I agree with your rationale, if it is the governor's rationale, to have some discernment on whether or not to fill that vacancy. I think that makes sense. But I don't think that he has that authority to do so according to what's been referenced here today. And so I think that we might need some kind of mechanism within the charter in order to do a writ of mandamus or some cause of action to force that should it not happen. I think for political reasons that the county commission might not do that on their own unless they are being forced to do so by the charter. So I don't think a county commissioner wants to voluntarily go against, a governor of maybe the same party unless they're being required to do so. So I think that we have to have some kind of recourse if we feel like the governor is not executing, the Constitution on our behalf as the Constitution states. I don't know if that's something to be added into this amendment or not. But.
I won't. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a concern, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
So if you take the current scenario that we have in being a charter county, several times the issue have come up about supermajority and majority and what is a supermajority, and because no appointment's been made, there's been some debate whether you gotta still act like you got 5 commissioners when you really only have 4, and then you gotta go declare supermajority on that 4. I think we do need to address that if the governor doesn't do something, and because we're a charter county, and I think the charter says that you got to have 4 votes when you're operating for 6 or 9 months with 4 commissioners. That makes it very difficult. And I would really like to see somehow, if the governor doesn't appoint that the county commissioners, I go back to my other position that they unanimously appoint somebody.
Okay. Let me ask one question, because when I kind of referenced that earlier, I think to your point, if we, can we, Mr. Googleman, put a parameter on this, meaning that if the governor has not appointed within X number of days, that a county commission could unanimously appoint someone without running afoul of law?
I don't think you could, no, unfortunately. And I think that's the problem. The Constitution and the state statute's pretty straightforward. If it's 28 months or less in the term, then it's strictly up to the governor to go ahead and fill it.
Okay, and then I know you've done a lot of research. This is a unique situation. Again, I think I gave the reasons why I think the governor made this choice, so that you have a very open election this cycle. But in most cases that I've seen in years past, the governor has been pretty quick to appoint. This is a unique situation, obviously, given the proximity to the election. But again, just because our lawyer says so doesn't stop the legislature. So why should it stop us? Does anyone want to go down this road? Right. So,
Mr. Chairman, the lack of appointment may have been a result. It may have been a quiet message by the governor that somebody needs to look at our charter to see if it squares with the law.
There you go.
Or the governor may have decided he was staying out of politics in Brevard County.
I think that's the call here. I'm sorry, Mr. Nye, I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah, just so we're saying there's nothing we can put into the charter, because I'm just thinking of the politics involved, right? Like you say, I don't think even if the county commission had standing, that, for political reasons, they may not want to challenge the sitting governor. And I'm not just talking about this one, I'm talking about anyone in the future. And so the question is there any mechanism we can put in the charter to basically compel them to action to remove the political aspect of it? We're saying there's not anything we can put in there that says that they would seek all, legal remedies or whatever to compel the governor to appoint should this circumstance come up again? Like, isn't there a way we could phrase that to essentially take them, take any political pressure off of them, but at the same time, achieve the, at least.
I think any citizen would have any citizen within the jurisdiction that
Well,
is
that was why I asked
affected by this
earlier.
would have standing.
Right,
but,
somebody in District 2 essentially could say, hey,
I think anyone in the county of Brevard could in the situation of a county commissioner, but a city official, obviously, it would have to be someone within the city, I think, would have arguable standing, but.
Okay. I mean, that's just I agree with Commissioner Fisher, former Commissioner Fisher, that obviously the supermajority thing is an issue.
So you're saying, Mr. Goodman, there's no way to get around the less than 28 months rule with, if the governor doesn't make an appointment, that the county commissioners could not make a decision?
I don't think they can, no.
What does other counties do? I mean, other counties that commissioners.
Other counties have put provisions in their charter that simply say that the vacancy will be filled as provided by law.
So there's no county has ever appointed
And then in the
county commissioner?
case of Orange County included that the vacancy will be filled as provided by law. And then they put another little kicker in there, which says if the law is ever amended to allow local option, then the following process will occur.
So let me ask you this way. Are you saying the 67 counties, there's not any county commission have ever appointed anybody to serve other than the governor, fill a vacancy?
Well, first of all, we're only looking at charter counties, so it's less than 67. And I couldn't opine as to Dade or Duval because those two counties, as you are probably aware, are constitutionally sanctioned. They have their own process that is completely different from, from other counties.
Okay.
Again, I brought this legal question up and opened this can of worms, but as I look at it, and based on your opinion, I think we all agree that we want the position filled. But I only think there's two pathways to get there. It's either through the courts, which anybody can do, they can drop the lawsuit, or work through our local delegation when they're in session and say, hey, we'd like you to look at this part of the Constitution and tweak it.
So with the 28 months, you have a vacancy that could occur for 2 years plus, which means that we have two budgets that are being voted for. Major decisions go on for over half the term of this elected office. Does the charter or does the county commission have the ability then to fill a vacancy temporarily until the governor should make an appointment? Because I did see some language in some of the other charters that has that temporary vacancy being filled until a special election occurs. So can we temporarily fill that vacancy until? No. I knew the answer was no, but I tried.
Sorry.
You're telling me there's a chance. Okay. Well, I think, I think the point is well taken. I think if you want to change this law, it would take an act of the legislature. I never was brought this in my 10 years in the legislature. And so I think we're in the box now where it makes a lot of sense to follow what current law is. If this is a legitimate issue, we have our Brevard County delegation meeting, we can kind of bring this up. Maybe we can even do some more homework to see if there has been these prolonged vacancies. I'd be shocked if the governor went a substantial amount of time historically leaving a vacancy like that because of the importance, as you and Mr. Burns and others have brought up. So, so we can move forward. Is there any objection to the proposal put forth by Mr. Tredis? Okay, without objection, we'll show that amendment adopted, thus taking the place of the Burns amendment. We're now on final passage, which will require 10 votes in order to place this on the ballot to comport ourselves well with state law. Any debate on that? Okay. Getting pretty close to that. Well, again, we can have some fun with this, but I think we all recognize what the reality is. So, Melissa, why don't you go ahead and call the roll on this measure? Again, it will take 10 votes to be passed and placed on the ballot for the voters this fall.
Robin Fisher,
Yes, because I don't have a choice.
Kendall Moore,
Yes.
Marcia Newell,
Yes.
Blaze Tredis,
Yes.
Bob White,
Yes.
Matt Nye,
Yes.
Tom Jenkins,
Yes.
Cole Oliver,
Yes.
Sue Schmidt,
Yes.
Jordan Chandler,
Ditto with Mr. Fisher said. Yes.
Vic Lubker,
Yes.
Dave Newman,
Yes.
Mike Herodopoulos,
Yes. And by your vote, the proposal passes. It'll be on the ballot pending the 3-judge panel.
And I just want to say, I appreciate the dialogue we've had here. I think we talked about some very important things and identified some things. My only ask is that when Florida Today writes it up, say that Mr. Burns' proposal was adopted with Mr. Tredis's amendment.
That's Montgomery Burns. Montgomery Burns. You got it. Well, congratulations for everyone for following the law. That's great.
Achieving the bare minimum.
Yeah. We're doing a lot of K, what's that term? KI, okay. All right, so we are now finished with our active proposals. We now move to public comment, which is G. We do not have any cards in front of us. We now have unfinished business, with is tab H, and that's dealing with the language to make sure that we have our measures in order. So let's first go to proposal number 4, the 3-attorney process. It was passed 12-1 on July the 7th. And that's under tab H. Mr. Jacobs Kirstein is not here. Mr. Gugelman, why don't you take over for him and kind of walk through what the proposed language is for the ballot, and we'll go from there.
Okay, and which one are we I'm trying to find which one we're looking at.
I'm looking at proposal number 20?
Resolution 4.
But it was amendment number, it was the 20th proposal, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So are we going to call this number 4 or number 20? Number 4 on the ballot then? Okay, perfect, okay. So you recognize Mr. Goodwin?
Thank you. This is a two-part amendment. The first part indicates that when there's a Charter Review Commission proposal that's going for attorney review, the attorney review panel shall be picked by the Charter Review Commission, and it shall have a fiduciary duty to the Charter Review Commission. The second part of the proposal indicates that the attorney review panel will have to review the proposal within 15 days to prepare a comprehensive report. And if 2 members of the 3-person panel reject the proposed amendment, the proposal shall be returned to the Charter Review Commission for a reasonable opportunity to cure any defect. The panel's report to help the Charter Review Commission has to include, with specificity, any rationale for rejecting the proposed language and a suggested manner in which the defect can be cured. And this proposal also would extend the term of the Charter Review Commission for the purpose of considering any item that's been rejected by the Attorney Review Panel and returned to the Charter Review Commission.
All right, are there questions for Mr. Gugelman on the language? All right, this, for the adopt the language, we just need a simple majority because we've already voted the 10. So is there any objection to adopting the language proposed? All right, let's just do a voice vote. All those in favor of the language say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed say nay. Show that language adopted. Okay, next we move to proposal number 5, which is found in tab I, dealing with vacancies and suspensions, which we just covered. Mr. Tredis, this is yours. So why don't you go ahead and just read that again for us so we can adopt that language if everyone's comfortable with it.
Section 2.7, vacancy and suspension. A vacancy or suspension in the office of county commission shall be defined and filled as provided by law. A vacancy created by recall shall be filled as provided in section 5.2 of this charter, end quote.
Are there any questions? Mr. Jenkins?
Should we include language that says we are correcting a problem with the current language?
I'm open to whatever y'all want to do. I mean, it's because it's kind of, a lot of people aren't going to know that, but it wouldn't hurt to put some, for use Ms. Schmidt's turn, make sure that everyday voters who haven't gone through this process with this understand exactly what we're doing.
Mr. Chairman, what we can do when we turn this into formal resolution, into our formal standard resolution format for your execution, is we can include a recital in there that explains that it's, the purpose of it is to correct an inconsistency with the law. We would have to make sure that that gets into the ballot summary. And that's what you're looking for, is to see it in the ballot summary.
I think you're right. I think that voters need to understand they're not just, what they're doing, and we do, but no one else is watching this. So I think it's a good idea. And can we don't do it here, we'll do it when we have to do it right now?
No, it'll be in the final resolution that we present for your signature.
Okay.
Do we at least need a motion or something? Or?
Yeah. Wait, is it just up to me? I mean, I just want to make sure everyone feels included and knows what the language might be. I mean, what kind of sentence? Not to be the final say, but to Mr. Chicken's point, I want to make sure that you all understand what we're doing, because how they write these things matters, and I want to make it clear. Yeah. Any idea how that might sound?
Yeah, it would sound something along the line is to correct an inconsistency with the law in the current charter. The following amendment will occur.
Is that okay with you? Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay. So everyone approve of that? Say yay?
Yay.
Okay, so I can sign with confidence. Thank you. Okay, so we have approved that for ballot language as well. The other item under tab I was defeated today. That is proposal number 6, dealing with term limits. So we do not have that. Now our final issue, of course, is proposal. Will this become number 6 or stay as number 7, Melissa?
It'll become 6.
Okay. 6. So this will become number 6, and this has to do with Workforce Housing Trust Fund. You see the language before you. Does anyone have concerns about the language before them? What page is that on?
Well, I don't, it's proposal 24, and it's about maybe halfway through tab I.
It's right after proposal 17, which is, closer towards the end of section I.
And in particular, you want to look at the ballot language as well.
2022-007.
Yeah, which we're going to renumber as 6.
Okay, yeah, I see it. 2022-007. It says in the top, item 3, with approval of F3.
How about this, Mr. Chair? Do you mind just reading it?
Yeah.
Proposal number 6, I'm assuming it would be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Workforce and supportive housing, the amendment establishing affordable housing trust fund to assist in establishing affordable housing for renters and homeowners to create and increase workforce housing opportunities throughout the county. The trust fund shall be funded as directed by the county commission from revenue sources and does not create a new form of taxation.
That's under 75 days, right?
Yes.
I have a question. How do we know it's not going to create a new form of taxation? It doesn't say that in the
Well,
proposal.
the reason that we know that is because local government cannot create a new tax. Only the legislature can authorize a new tax.
The public wouldn't know that from reading this, though. I mean, they would think that the county commission cannot raise taxes to pay for this.
Well, I don't think it says that. It says will not create a new form of taxation.
Right, I know, but the implication is, I think, that county commission is not going to be able to increase their taxes because of this, which
Well,
I don't think is,
the alternative is to strike that part of the ballot language.
I think it should be stricken, because that's the inference I get, is that the county commission cannot raise taxes to fund this, and they can. I mean, literally, it may be correct, but the inference is, don't worry about the county commission raising your taxes for this.
Yeah, I see that. I don't think it changes what you're trying to accomplish, so.
So if it takes a motion, I'd move to strike and does not create a new form of taxation.
I'll second that.
Mr. Chandler, it's your proposal? Let us know why you think it should or should not be.
I'm fine with that, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chandler, I think you might want that language in there. That really
Well,
helps
yeah,
some voters in this county understand the economic consequences, you know. That'd be my gut. Is that a good, I was trying to,
Well, no, yeah, I was sitting here thinking about that. I
if
mean,
there's a legal challenge, that's a separate issue.
Correct. Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think you do have to spell it out. Yeah, I just, general fund, yeah, NEM.
But they could.
Oh, that has to go to ballot.
So this says that it's not going to happen. I know literally that what Mr. Gugelman said, but again, I think the inference is that to the voter, and this is it, this is the ballot language, which is, nah, your taxes aren't going to be increased because of this, and that's not literally true. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe they will increase it.
Well, you can say it about any county officials saying, well, their finances, I don't know if that's it.
Well, that may very well be the case, but if there's something on the ballot that the voter is reading and it infers to the voter has a reasonable expectation that what it's saying is that it's not going to raise taxes, but it actually could. That's the issue. I mean, yeah, you could say it, but we're saying it on a ballot, inducing people to vote a particular way.
I don't think it's going to raise their taxes. The county's going to make a decision how they want to fund. It's just
Right.
that they can do that without raising taxes.
Mr. Chair.
We agree on that.
I think,
The issue is whether
Helen,
the language should be on it.
I think what we all agreed on is that the only source of revenues for this is the surplus lands program. So I think so that people, I think, I'm sorry?
Oh, correct.
So I think that you're going to have to, because I think it's a little broad in this language, and I think you need to put in there about surplus lands somewhere, I think, because that's the reason I voted for it. Because I only recognize this as surplus lands, and it's the option, and it's not required. So I think you're going to have to give more clarity, because this is what voters see, and I think the only reason you have 10 votes for this thing is because the expectation is there would not be new revenues created or dollars moved around that would force a higher tax.
Mr. Chair, procedural question on the because as I understand it, we're voting on the language for the ballot, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that 10 vote again, or are we at the majority
I
vote of
think
the
we're, I
13
think
of
we're
us
at
here?
the simple majority, but we can also move to reconsider.
Sure.
And I know there's only one vote needed to kill it. So I think that there should be more clarity as to, I voted for this because it's an option, not as another way of spending money one place so you can raise the tax somewhere else. So let's just be clear here where I would go if we can't make this language very clear.
Correct. And so, I mean, several valid points have been raised here. So in our discussions here, and as I stated many times, the proposal itself, as I stated, my intent was never to increase or put a new taxation forward, right? This was simply looking at, when I provided the original proposal, a litany of funding sources that the county currently has available. So if the language that we need to put in there is the trust fund shall be funded as directed by the county commission from the sale of surplus real property. But now the kicker clause in my proposal was, or any other sources as established by ordinance for, so.
Mr. Chair?
But once again, I think the question here is that in order for a taxation to happen is that it would have to go on the ballot. I mean, this is not a half-cent sales tax or anything like that to address this issue.
Well, let the people, again, I sense some concern here. The people who have the concerns, Mr. White and Mr. Tredis, Mr. Nye, I think you bring up valid concerns. Walk me through where you're comfortable. What language you'd be comfortable with, because it's important. Because no one's going to vote for a tax increase.
Correct.
And you'll lose if there is one. And no one on this board wants to see taxes go up to do this.
Absolutely.
So work through this. Those folks who are concerned, what language you'd be okay with so that we can put this on the ballot and be comfortable. If not, we need to have a vote again on the 10 and they'll go down.
Mr. Chairman, why not just insert language, no tax dollars?
You can't do that because you're using general fund dollars potentially, which are,
Well, no, but you're not using tax dollars. You're not using sales tax. You're not using ad valorem tax. You could be getting grant dollars. You could be getting private donations. I mean, you get a lot of things. I think your concern is the tax.
Yeah, it is. And I think what we really want to do is give them more tools. This is another bucket in which they create money without taxing people.
Correct.
That's why they got to 10. So what I'm asking is the folks who had concerns because of this to help Mr. Chandler with the language so we can compromise this out. I think Mr. Jenkins is a valid point. If you all are comfortable with his language, I'll go with it. I just want to make sure that it's abundantly clear that this is not raise a tax because, in my mind, but Mr. Tredis, you brought up the thing that if they start maneuvering existing dollars, it could put pressure to maybe raise a tax in the future, I think is what your argument might be.
Yes,
Okay.
and the county commission can do that under what was just passed because it says other sources as established by ordinance. So if the ordinance is to spend $1 million in general revenue, then that's what's going to happen.
He's right.
That's tax money.
It doesn't create a new tax that way, but if they feel pressure because they're moving dollars from A to B, there could be a tax or pressure to put a tax rate. I think that's the second part of the question.
True.
So help me with the ballot language so that we could make this tighter.
Well, I'm Mr. Helper, and I already said what I thought, which is, and does not create a new form of taxation.
Mr. Knight?
Yeah, no, I think, right, the onus is on you. I seconded that motion to remove the sentence that Mr. Tredis recommended, and I think now it's up to you guys. And I know, Mr. Moore said he really thinks it needs to be there.
Well,
So give us
let me go back to my statement. I said it from a pure political context, but in order for it to remain there, it's got to be two things, legal and true. Right, and so if you've raised an issue that either it does raise a tax or there's a legal issue, then, you need to strike it. But I think clearly it was there because the basis for everybody that voted for it was that it wasn't going to create a new tax.
Correct.
Right, so I think that's the fundamental given.
If you,
Well, I think the best, just from listening to your discussion, I think the best solution is to do exactly as Mr. Tredis has recommended, and that is to, at the end of the ballot question, to strike the language "and does not create a new form of taxation."
If,
He's not.
I'm not, but, I'm not opposed to it, but I don't want the thought process from my conservative friends to be, okay, well, this is identified as another tax, right? Because when voters look at that on the ballot, it's going to appear that it is another tax. I'm not opposed to striking that language from it. I mean, obviously, I want it to get there. And so I think Mr. Newman.
I don't think this would change anything particularly crazy, but for me, when it says as directed by the county commission, that's also not necessarily what we voted on either. Can we actually put the trust fund shall be funded through the sale of surplus lands or predominantly through the sale of surplus lands? And that includes the strike through of the, and does not create a form of taxation. So everybody's happy. You're saying specifically where it's coming from. And then also, well, the other source is anything. I mean, that's a catch-all clause.
Yeah.
That just it's not necessarily a second source, at least in my opinion. Is it a second source, Mr.
Yeah,
Lawyer?
it is.
Okay. See, I thought it was a more catch-all clause.
Here's something else to think about, folks. I know where my good friend is coming from, but we gotta be real careful. We're not sitting here trying to count votes as well to get it over the finish line. I think the integrity of this and the work that Jordan has put in, we need to go with what your intent was. And your intent was never to raise taxes. That's how you got our vote. So we need to add that, then add it.
can I just, if we went with what Attorney Googleman just said, which was to strike everything after the word sources, and then added the word existing between the words from and revenue. The trust fund shall be funded as directed by the county commission from existing revenue sources, period.
I think you could just take out the trust fund shall be funded as directed by county commission, put a period, and then just stop everything else.
Yeah.
But you gotta have taxable language in there.
I like Bob's idea.
But that's exactly what exactly what the proposal says. It's going to be funded as directed by the county commission. That's what it says. Doesn't force them to do anything, doesn't require them to do a thing.
Correct.
Just says they shall do it. So I think striking from revenue is good too.
So you'd put the period at the end of the word commission.
Right.
Cleaner.
The trust fund shall be funded as directed by the county commission, period, though still provides or allows for a tax increase.
Which they can do.
Well, true. That's true.
That's a big hypothetical.
You know, from a pragmatic standpoint, the sale of surplus property is not going to be sufficient to do a whole lot. You're going to have alternative funding to make an impact.
I think that's well established.
So once again, I think it's very valid points raised here, and I think it's back to what the language Mr. Bob White just said. The trust fund shall be funded as directed by the county commission. Same thing Mr. Fisher said in period. Cutting out the.
We have a motion and a second on the floor, right?
Correct.
Pull it off. Just stop it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Correct.
That'd be up to Mr. Trennis.
That is a huge hypothetical we're throwing out there. That has to be done via us, via the citizens. So to imply that that's what's going on here, that's just simply not the case.
Mr. Nye?
Yeah, all I was going to say is, you look at the school board referendum, and they swore they wouldn't shuffle things around, and they did. So I think it's a valid concern as far as that piece of it.
I agree.
Who has a problem stopping the county commission, period? Maybe Mr. Chairman get a feel for who has a problem directed by county commission.
Well, I mean, that whole sentence went away Mr. Chandler pretty much agreed to it. Then Mr. Moore said he might want to keep that in there. So.
There's a motion on the floor, so it's not a winner for me, so.
Okay, I just want to, I want to show the intent of 10 voters here,
Right.
so that the 600,000 people live in the county understand that we're giving the county commission a tool to help out with affordable housing. And the tool that we hope they use is this surplus lands. But as Mr. Jenkins said perfectly, that's not much money. And it goes back to our earlier point, which is this should be something that, do you codify this in the charter or not? So that's I think the concern that a lot of people have. And I voted for it because it was a tool. But now that, as we open up more of these cans of worms, I think I just want it clear that people recognize what our intent was. And if they want to pass this, understand that the county commission might spend more money here, which might put more pressure to raise taxes. That's just the truth. And if you don't believe it, as Mr. Nye just said, it happens. So let's figure out this language that gives comfort to folks who want to do the right thing and help folks out, but not subject themselves to another requirement that could come into play.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Oliver said, I think Mr. Tredis had a motion on the floor, which was a recommendation seconded by Mr. Nye. So I think I don't recollect exactly what that was.
It's to eliminate, to end it, county commission, and delete from revenue sources, and does not create a new form of taxation. And I think, again, that is literally true. That is what is, when that's deleted, you can't argue, because that's exactly what is done by the proposal. It's going to be funded as, the proposal shall be funded by the county commission, and that's where it says there.
Mr. Nye, you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was what I
Mr.
said.
White, you okay with that language?
Okay.
Okay. All right, so all those in favor, as just read by Mr. Tredis, where the period will come after commission, and we will strike from revenue sources and does not create a new form of taxation. Is everyone comfortable with that? All right, without objection, show that adopted. So now we're on the final version for the vote. All those in favor of the adopted measure, which struck from revenue sources and does not create a new form of taxation, say yay.
Yay.
And those say nay. Okay, show it adopted, so the ballot language is now approved, striking that language after commission. Okay, that was fun. Just want to make sure everyone's clear. Okay, so we have come to all of the issues before us today. So we have a total of 6 measures heading to the ballot?
Yes.
Okay. All right, before we, Mr. Tredis.
I have a question. Do we know when the 3-attorney review panel is going to finish their work, and will their conclusions be sent to us? I'm not talking their whole legal opinions, but just what the final answer is.
The one firm has asked for 5 days, so it would be the end of a week from now-ish. And then, yes, we will send the agenda. I believe it's county attorney who put the agenda to the Board of County Commissioners for August 16th. So we will email that agenda to every member of the review committee.
Thank you.
All right, other things for discussion? Well, I want to thank again the staff for a remarkable job. They did a super job, and keeping us well informed and in order. And I want to thank everyone for being such gentlemen and women to handle this in a thoughtful way. I thought, unlike in Washington and Tallahassee, we can get along. And I really appreciate everyone's patience with me and the team, and wish you all the best this summer. And with that, Mr. Nye, moves you rise. Meeting adjourned.
Before we do that, are we now free from sunshine over there?
Thank you for your steady hand, by the way.
Thank you, thank you.
I think we are, because I think we're done.
Thank you.
Hooray. And whoever made this new booklet so nice and pretty.
It's beautiful.
So thank you. Meeting adjourned.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.